Miriam Meets on RTE Radio 1 with Miriam O'Callaghan.
Hello there. My guests this morning have known each other for more than 40 years and are great friends. Just before Christmas, Cork-born actor and comedian Niall Toibin was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Irish Film and Television Academy. Father Brian Darcy was born in County Fermanagh. He entered religious life 50 years ago this year when he joined the Passionist Order at the Gran near Enniskillen. He's currently rector at the monastery there. Brian is known to a wider audience through his journalism and broadcasting. Some would describe him as an unofficial chaplain to the show business community. You've known each other for almost ever, have you, Neil?
Well, a very long time, yeah. He was a constant visitor. Well, not a constant, but a frequent visitor to our house. And we fed him, because that's what you do when the priest arrives, you see. And as a matter of fact, one of the greatest stories we have is that when my grandson, Billy, was... one day I was on the phone and there was a knock came at the door and Billy was sort of prowling around under my feet and I opened the door with one hand and continued talking on the phone with the other, and Brian came in, and just at that moment Billy found a sixpence under the table, looked at it and without looking up just handed it over his shoulder to Father Darcy. And Brian said, "Oh my God, he has his cop done already. You find money, give it to the priest. That's what he's here for."
And that is a true story. I remember it was a Sunday afternoon. I dropped in and I hadn't seen yourself with Julie for a while, and I just dropped in. I was visiting Dublin. I'd left Mount Argus at that stage and had spent about 10 years trying to put a roof and the walls and everything else on Mount Argus, and everywhere everybody knew me as the beggar priest, And so he had his grandson brainwashed. When you see Darcy, give him money.
Can you remember the first time you met Neil?
My first time meeting Neil was Neil was on stage and I was in the audience, and I've always been a huge fan of his. And then I used to meet him actually coming up to Mass. I don't think he liked me saying this, but I was parish priest in Mount Argus for years, and Neil was our most distinguished parishioner in the whole place. And indeed, for many years, read the Irish lesson at Mass. And in the audience was people like Jack Lynch and Taoiseach Jack Lynch, who came to the same Irish Mass. And indeed...
And Jack Lynch made me come in. He said, "There's the one that they let you in here at all."
And he was a lovely man and a good friend of yours.
Well, he was a neighbour of ours. So his aunt was our next door neighbour in Cork, when I was growing up. So
yeah,
I mean, he could take any liberties he liked with me. He knew too much about me anyway.
Because of course the interesting thing is, although as Brian says, you went to Mass a lot, at the same time you were probably doing your incredible satire about, criticising clerics in a way.
Yeah.
You did a famous Old Testament, didn't you?
It's one of the great things Neil ever did. Now, I don't think he's going to tell you, but I think the man he based it on used to say the Irish Mass in Mount Argus. He was one of those sort of tribal northerners who spoke Irish with a very northern accent like that. And Neil, I remember saying this to Neil in one of our first conversations. I know who you're imitating in that. And he didn't deny it then, and he's not likely to deny now. But Wesley Burroughs wrote a lovely thing for him about, do you know the battles that used to go on in the Old Testament?
Lo, it came to pass that the tribes of Gob rose up and fell upon the tribes of Gath and slew them, and brake their bodies and raped their women and ate their children and took their bodies and burnt them. And the tribes of Gath, being sore afraid, rose up and cried unto the Lord God, who is merciful, "Wherefore, O Lord, have we been smitten by these tribes of Gob?" And the Lord God, who is merciful, said unto them, Ye have been by these tribes of Gob, because I forget what that is, but anyway, it goes on, and the tribes of Gob, and finally, Lo, Lord, they have smitten us again. And the Lord God, who is merciful, said unto them, for he was weary, Have ye not thought of smiting them back? And the tribes of Gath rose up and fell upon the tribes of Gob and smote them back and slew their camels and ripped their women and ate their children and brake their bodies. And the Lord God, who was merciful, saw it and was pleased.
No, you said that was wonderful, and that's why I think the man's an absolute genius.
That for 30 years.
No,
I know, thanks a million, because that wasn't planned. So, is it just somewhere in the back of your brain?
It's somewhere there. Well, I mean, it's one of the things that would come back to me anyway, because it used to corpse the place. I mean, I wouldn't be able to go on for another 3 minutes.
And it wasn't. I remember the first time you did that. It was in a show that you did in the Gaiety Theatre, probably the early days of your one-man show, coming direct in from RT and rep and all that. And you stood there with your Dickie Bow and black tie and all the rest of it. And this just came out. And I thought it was one of the funniest things I had ever seen in my life, because it's actually, the Old Testament is a bit like that, you know, but it's just taken the Old Testament. And only
Wesley Burroughs. Actually.
Wesley Burroughs.
Brilliant writer.
Who wrote the Reardons, etc. And then wrote too, I think.
Wesley wrote wonderful stuff.
Wonderful stuff. But it was just so good. Did you ever think of smiting them back? You know, I just thought that was better. And you were saying to him that Niall used to tell stories that were maybe criticising priests. I don't think I ever heard him tell a story that actually criticised priests. He made fun of our foibles, which is a quite different thing altogether. And, you know, people can be very critical without being didactic in their criticism. But Niall was always, I mean, if you looked at him, you began to say, I hate him because he's right.
But of course, you would have been doing this at a time when not everybody criticised the Catholic Church. I mean, to be honest, like, it was a very conservative, very deferential society when you were doing those kind of skits.
Oh my God, I went through a hell of a time, I can tell you. I mean, I was regarded as, you know, the Antichrist, and I've had a collection of all the county councils that denounced me and so forth.
And would that mostly be, Neil, around like Time Now, Mr. T? The programme, you did that with Owen Harris, didn't you? And Wesley Burroughs and Miriam O'Callaghan.
Yeah.
Was that the show, in a sense, that maybe would have caused you a lot of criticism for being satirical?
You know, I had a lot of personal discomfort over it, but I remember one time Jack Lynch, who was a neighbour of ours, he was Taoiseach at one time there, while I was sort of on the I was going to say on the game, but
another part of your career.
But yes, but he sort of said to me, "You see, you're getting it tough." He says, "All the Holy Marys are at you."
But like, it was interesting. You grew up beside the Bishop's Palace in Cork, didn't you, Neil? Tell me about your own childhood, about where you grew up and what your parents were like.
Well, my father was a very peculiar and eccentric man. He was a very good man. He was very but fanatical. He never spoke English to anybody until it was absolutely necessary. He was very stern in many ways, but he was very humorous behind it all, which was his saving grace, actually.
What did your father do, Niall? What did your father do?
He was a teacher in the School of Commerce in Cork, and he taught, oddly enough, he taught English and Irish, and he was very eccentric in ways. He used to do breathing exercises, you know, and this is true, you know, and I'm not mocking my father, but he'd come on and give a "Oh," and all the crows would fly out of the garden. The neighbours did come to the conclusion that he was slightly eccentric.
And so did the crows, obviously.
But did he give you some, maybe, of your ammunition or your love for mimicry and satire later? I mean, where did you get that talent from? Was it the Kerry relations?
I don't know where it came from, really, but it was that I did have a big range of people. For instance, we were in an area, it was a road which was very respectable. You see, Cork was expanding a bit at the time, and we had some very, very distinguished neighbours, and a society that was growing and, you know, and becoming a bit more. What's the word?
Cosmopolitan?
Well, no.
Avant-garde?
No, richer, actually.
Richer, okay.
And...
But didn't you have some Kerry relations that yourself and your brother used to mimic when you were young? Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell me about that.
Oh, we'd go down to Kerry and... Like, to us, I mean, it was just hilarious, all these Kerry people talking like that, He said, did you hear the accent of your men? They talk so funny down here, don't they?
You see, that's the genius of the man. Like, to most of us, Kerry and Cork are not that different, you know what I mean? Yeah. But his brilliance of
so
that,
we'd
be able to do that.
Yeah, but my brother Colm and myself, we'd be. He was only just 2 years younger than me, and we were a right pair, And I know we'd be upstairs in bed. We'd be sent up to bed, and of course they'd be down in the kitchen, the Kerry, and they'd all be down there, the nail, and they'd be talking about this, that, and the other thing, and all in those deep voices, and they'd all come up through the boards, of course, and we'd be listening to all this and falling around the place upstairs, mimicking our uncles and aunts and so on.
One of the great things that Niall used to do too, and it was a classic example of the genius of the man. He did a little tour of the country, starting in his beloved Cavan, whom he made famous actually, and then he'd go right down to Clare, and then he'd go into the Midlands, and then he'd go to the Dublin, man. But the one that I absolutely loved from him was the one that was, I think it was Galway, about the fly in the soup. Can you remember that one, Niall? And because it brings in the best of his Irish and the best of his mimicry.
Oh yeah, the guy that's he is school teacher or school inspector, and he goes into Galway and the hotel, and he's I guess ordained dinner, so on, and he discovers there's a fly in the soup. So he said, Chosúr, Hash, Bjarne, and he points at the fly. Cadê? Bjarne, he points at the fly again. An Cilliog. An Cilliog. An Cilliog. You see, it's feminine. Oh, Lord, she's having a great eyesight. Well, that is the simplest thing. Well, that's just to slay audiences. I mean, anyone who knew Irish they were completely corpsed, But that sort of thing came to me in a way because of my fluency in Irish, and so that I could turn that into what turned out to be hilarious, rather filthy joke in a way. And I would get away with it.
No, it was great. But listen, wasn't there another joke talking about that you love about Cavan?
Oh, well, I'll never forget this. I had left Dublin at this stage, and I was up back in Enniskillen, and I saw that the Sleeve Russell had just opened, and the Sleeve Russell, as you know, you just came round the corner, and all of a sudden there was this amazing thing sprung out of the wind bushes, and it was the wonderful genius of Sean and Patricia Quinn who did that, and it was lovely to see it. And the first night they opened for a major concert, who did they invite? Only the man who had always talked about the main Cavan people. They invited him up to open it. Well, you could say that, I can. And so they invited him. It was a stroke of genius. The man that was always criticising Cavan. Now, Guy, how are you going to criticise this? You see? So and I went up to see, and I spoke to Niall before it, and he was a bit nervous about how they might receive him or might not receive him. The place was full of the best of Cavan in that night. And he comes out on the stage, and they introduce him, and it's just a warm enough sort of applause, but nothing brilliant, And he comes out on the stage, and he sticks the two hands deep in the pocket, And he walks to the centre of the stage. There was nobody else on the stage than himself, sort of well dressed. He puts the two hands deep into the pocket. He looks at the fantastic chandelier at the back of the hall. He then looks at the wooden panelling on the side of the hall. He looks then at the lovely carpet, and he looks at the soft seats and the well-adorned people on the seats, and he looks then and finally, at a beautiful big chandelier above him on the stage, an expensive £1,000 chandelier on the stage, and he looks down and he says, then after about a minute of looking, he said, "So this is what you were saving for." And the whole place just erupted. And he became an honorary Cavan man that night. But when you were doing the Cavan accent, what did you do with your mouth? Because you could get a Cavan accent better than a Cavan man.
Well, I don't know now. I'm not going to give away the secrets of my trade, and that's for fire. You can go and invent your own.
But look, to bring us into our first piece of music, Brian, how come you ended up, I suppose, it's not that you're a showbiz priest, but you ended up, I suppose, being a priest to a lot of people who were in show business?
It began because I had a fascination with from the very earliest days. I was brought up as a young fella by going to see show bands. And I remember seeing, when I was about 14 years of age, Brendan Boyer and the Royal Show Band in 1959 in the Town Hall in Enniskillen. And I saw Tom Dunphy, God be good to him, doing all the great country songs. I saw Brendan Boyer coming out as Elvis. And I was hooked from that day on. And then I went to school with a lot of guys in Noma, like Brian Call of the Platinum and Frankie McBride of the Polka Dots, also the Clipper Carletons and the Melody Aces and Gene Turbin and Shea Turbin, all the boys of the Melody Aces. I knew them all. So when I came to Dublin then, and at about 18 years of age, as a young clerical student, dressed with a whole collar on me, had 4 vows: poverty, chastity, obedience, and a promise to devote my life to spreading the devotion to the Passion. And I had all these at 18. Forever in my life, you know, and I just didn't, and no, I didn't realise that, and was young. And my mother died then, just very shortly in that, when I was the next year. So I was lost in Dublin, really, and I was sent to university that I didn't want to go to, but you know, because I just wasn't good enough to be in university, I thought. And on a Thursday evening we had a day off, and what happened was in Mount Argus we could go out all right on bicycles, but we had no money ever. We were never given money. So there was no place you could go, only up the road or down a cycle. And a collar, you still had to go out with your Roman colours. What the hell, where the hell you were? You were this mini priest. And I used to go down to the Belvedere Hotel. Because the bands used to stay in the Belvedere Hotel, and I'd get a free cup of tea off the bands in the Belvedere Hotel, and I'd have a chat with them. And then other bands came in. So by the time I was 2 years a student, I knew every show band in the country at that particular stage. And they saw me as a non-threatening guy who was just simply a friend who was interested in the stuff. And that's how it came to be. I then began writing for it in 1966 when Albert Reynolds asked me to write for a magazine that he had produced with the late Jimmy Malloy and Eddie Mastis, and God be good to them all. And Albert asked me to write for it, so I wasn't allowed to listen to a radio or ever see a television or read a paper. And I was in university trying to be educated and not allowed even to speak to anyone other than my members of my own class. You were not allowed even to speak to other clerics.
Did that not drive you mad?
Well, of course, if you obeyed it, it'd drive you mad. But
who sort of thought up this regime?
That was the regime that was in there, Neil. That's the church that you were always talking about, and it was the church of secrecy and the church of awfulness, and the church of saying that the world was bad, and therefore, if you were going to be a priest, you could not have anything to do with the world. I could never understand how I was supposed to preach or talk or help people that they forbade me to listen to see what they were, and I never bought that. The show band and the show business people taught me that, because every night they go out, they have to face the people, and the sheer horror of having to face people every single night, and your future depends on how they react. Now, that does something to your vulnerability. That always struck me. What's the purpose of a person in show business? A person in show business has one purpose in life: to make life easier for others, to entertain them, to make them laugh, to forget their troubles, to be people that they can enjoy themselves and be themselves. I don't know of any vocation in life is that as good as that. And I have enormous respect for people in the business, because I learned humility, vulnerability, and an ability how to work hard at your craft to make sure that you always respected the person in the seat in front of you. Let that be a church or a theatre or a dance hall.
And it leads us to our first piece of music. You love the Tony Bennett, I Left My Heart in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Why do you like that, Neil?
I saw Tony Bennett 3 times in different in different locations doing his stuff. To me, he was the ultimate pro, and he absolutely loved pleasing people, and it was simple as that.
The loveliness of Paris seems somehow sadly gay. The glory that was Rome is of another day.
Tony Bennett there with that beautiful song, I Left My Heart in San Francisco. I suppose it's hard in your career, Niall, when you've done so much, to focus on one thing that some people may have thought you were the most brilliant at. But a lot of people talk about your Borstal Boy. For you, was that a very big moment, a very important part of your career?
It was, yeah. It was very odd because I knew Brendan Meehan very, very well. Brendan loved speaking Irish, and we used to talk in Irish to each other. He also liked to drink, and so did I. And we became, great sort of mates. And, for instance, I remember wonderful days with him. I remember Judy and myself, we weren't all that long married, and we were, on Patrick's Day, we decided to go to the races. And we went to Baldoyle on Patrick's Day, and we came down to queue for the bus. And who did we sit beside? Only Brendan and Beatrice. As the bus rolled out, he said, "Well, now we are approaching the racing area of Dublin City. This here, on the right-hand side, is Fairview Park, and you will see that there is only one tree in the middle of this park," which at the true time was true. And this tree is there because it is preserved, because it is a very historical tree, because it was there that Eamon de Valera and Maud Gon MacBride met each other and danced around that tree singing "When the Red, Red Robin Comes bobbing along." This was the opening to the bus trip to Baldoyle races. And we were with him for the whole races. And he won a good bit of money, and he was up at the top of the stand in Baldoyle, roaring and giving tips and non-stop sort of commentaries for the day. And it was absolutely hilarious, and his energy was non-stop.
So was it a big decision then for you to do Borstal Boy? Was it more difficult because you knew him so well or not?
No, it was easier because it... well, anyway, as Tomás McConaughey said, well, look, he said, we're going to do it. And he said, the only one who can do it is you, and he said, it'll be all the better because, it's almost like having himself doing it,
You actually looked like him, though, Neil.
What?
When you went on stage, you actually looked like him.
Yeah.
You walked like him.
Yeah. Oh, well,
he had everything down. It wasn't just the accent.
The walk was the most important
Yes.
thing. He had a very distinctive walk, and I was able to do that. And once I walked on, anybody who knew him, when they saw the walk, they said, "Oh, Jesus."
That's right.
The walk was and then the voice was easy because it was very distinctive, and I wasn't able to get the voice right. That was easy enough. But what you see, once I had established the character with the walk, well, that was great. And the old triangle, when jingle jangle along the banks of the Royal Canal.
Wow.
Isn't that just... Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And every time I hear that song, I can think of nothing else.
Yeah.
Not actually Brendan Behan at all, but I can just think of the great Niall Toibin just standing on the stage and drawing tears from a stone, just singing the loneliness, even when he was singing it there, the loneliness in Behan's heart just comes across.
Yeah.
And you got that, and very few people that I ever saw got that.
Yeah. But he was also very sensitive, and he was very shy, you know.
Is that why you drank so much? Why did you both drink so much at that time? Was that just a culture, or was it in your personalities?
It was a culture, really, you know. I mean, everybody did it, you know. And there was just very little else to do, to be honest, you know. I mean, the women would run away from you, so there was only the drink and go to confession, looking after your man.
You gave up drink, though.
Oh, so long ago.
Yeah. Why did you give it up? Can you remember the moment when you decided?
Well, there were hints from lots of people. No, I just realised that I had to, you know, that, you know, it's come to the end now because, I mean, I'm losing friends, you know, I'm upsetting my wife. You know, I was breaking her heart, I suppose, really, but anyway, it stopped.
Wasn't there a famous train journey or something you took, and that was a moment almost?
Coming back from Belfast, yes, I fell off the train and I had to be lifted up. I got a taxi and I never had a drink after that, because I had to go into hospital for about 2 weeks, and I was lectured by doctors and so on. But anyway, I mean, I knew I had to stop.
Very strong character, though, to be able to do that, isn't it, Brian? Like, to never drink since.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And that was it. He just, and sobriety became more important for him than anything other than his family. And that's the Niall that I've known all my life. And he can act the drunk terrifically well, and he can drive people to drink terrifically well. He's also one of those wonderful people that, and I think, you know, I had an enormous.
Doesn't get around to my sex life.
That's a confessional, okay?
But he was just you know, and he worked very hard, and his family meant everything to Niall as he was growing up, and he took great pride in them as he went along, and so did Judy. Judy was an absolutely lovely person. One of the nicest people I ever met was Judy. I had enormous time for Judy, and I know, Niall, that she thought absolutely the world of you.
I love how you met. Tell the story about the first time you saw her. She came into the bathroom or something where
That's
you were in
right,
digs.
yeah.
Tell me that.
I was staying in a digs in South Circular Road, and Martin she was from the Midlands, and she was a very stern woman, took no bullshit from anybody, and the house full of women. But her son Eamon was a pal of mine, a drinking pal of mine, and I was looking for a change of residence, and I was single, obviously, at the time. And Eamon said, "Sure, why don't you go into my ma's place, you see?" And he says, "It's a great place." He says, "Yes, there's about 50 women in there, so you'll have a great time." So anyway, to cut a long story short, I was there only a couple of nights when I was going out one night, and there were two girls in the door, and they were going out, and they said, "Where are you going?" And I said, I'm going to the dogs, actually." "Where?" I said, "Harold's Cross." "Oh, that's a good idea. Can we go with you?" And I said, "Of course." And that was how I met my wife, and I made a date with her for another night, and we stuck together and we got married and so on, and that was how I met her.
And on that note, we're going to take your Puck Abuela. You like this piece of music by Sean O'Shea?
Yeah. That song at one time was really very, very popular, and it's a great old song, and it reminds me of an era of sort of very sportive, very sort of loud and jolly. And there was a kind of a brightness in the country and in the air at that time. Hallelujah, you know, and it looked as if we were, you know, on the up. You know, it was a time of great, well, I wouldn't say great joy, but optimism. There was a kind of an upbeat feeling around that time.
And the pride of being in Irish and what is Irish, and and Puck Abuela is essentially Irish.
Maybe that's exactly what we need right now.
Yeah.
Mo gwaldom sir condra di vora, pigem goins medal mihil, ke casviram e gomar koi, ach hogan krone ser wille, hallelu, 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 von fucker wille,
You're both laughing about the fact you're wearing a shirt the same colour. Purple.
This is very good for radio, Miriam.
But they're exactly the same shirts.
Mauve, I would call mine. But they were.
Well, this is purple because it's the only bit of purple I'm ever going to get with
and
my
that's
reputation.
For sure, yeah.
Do you ever regret becoming a priest?
Oh, no, I never regret becoming a priest. I often think of leaving. Or have often thought of leaving. I never regret becoming a priest at all. Never, ever.
Your mother didn't want you to become a priest?
No, my mother never didn't want me, nor neither did my father ever want me to be a priest.
You never got promoted either, did you?
Which is a good thing in it, it's its own good self.
I assume that's because you're too outspoken.
No, it's because I haven't the ability.
I assume that's because he was too outspoken.
No, it's not really because it's because I associate with the wrong sort of people,
like Neil,
like Niall Toibin, etc., etc. And who wants promotion? What is promotion's not? You never joined that. My mother wanted me if I was going to be a priest. We went to Knock and she prayed for me that if I wanted to be a priest, I was to be a priest that helped people. That's what I've tried to do all my life. Not very successfully, but I've tried to do that. And that's what I think of being a priest is. So I've never regretted becoming a priest.
Maybe she worried because she knew her son and thought, I suppose if you look at Neil now, he's got his children, he's got his grandchildren, and you, I suppose, haven't got that. It can be a lonely life as a priest.
Well, it is. I mean, there's no point in joining it at the present regime. Anyway, I as you particularly know, I have said on many occasions, I don't think priests should have to be celibate. I don't think that's part of anything other than a discipline to keep guys subordinated and suppressed. I think that's the whole point of that. I don't think there's any value in that. If somebody wants to choose to be celibate for the rest of their life, that's different. But to impose celibacy is simply not arguable and never has been arguable and still isn't arguable. But it is part of the life now, and if you want to be a priest, that's the way you have to do it, and that's the way you have to remain. And that has its own implications. I think it has its own implications. It means that you have to deal with loneliness, because if you don't deal with loneliness, it deals with you. And
how do you deal with loneliness?
It changes with the years. When I was younger, it was by going out to dances and going to shows and going to that sort of thing and mixing with people.
Did you ever fall in love?
A couple of times. Well, once essentially, once really.
Did you think about leaving for that person?
I did, yes. But it was not possible at that particular time.
Any regrets about that?
No, it would have been great had it happened. It would have been lovely if it had happened. It didn't. So I have this idea that you try to do God's will as best you can. And I think that's an indication to me now that my job is here. I'm sure I would have made a terrible husband and father, actually, because
I don't think that's true.
Well, I think I would. I'm not sure that I would have had that sensitivity and ability just to devote yourself to something. I'd love to have. I might have had younger.
Don't ask me.
But at this stage of my life, no, I wouldn't have thought that was possible. So what I do is, at this particular stage, is I try and be terribly honest and have an integrated life. And I don't have to put on an act for anybody. What you see is what you get. And I don't know where it'll end, and I don't care. Life is a journey, and you do your best for each step of the way, and you have sort of to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, I may not be great, I don't have to be great, and I don't have to be perfect, but I'm as good as I can be today. And that's all that I have to say.
You
at
have
the end
very
of any
good
day.
friends, though. Even, for instance, Niall Toibin.
Yes.
I didn't realise, for instance, he was such a close friend of yours. But you have made a lot of close friends.
I've made a
in
lot
your
of
life.
very, very good friends, and I think all of them would say is that that they would have had doubts about me at various stages. What's he doing around show business people? And I simply admired the craft in others. There were other priests very associated with show business people, and as soon as the show business people got into trouble, they were gone. And the guys would always say that you stuck with us anyway. And I think that's the only thing I have in my favour.
For instance, Neil, as friends, close friends, did you find him, don't make me laugh now, but did you find him of comfort, for instance, when your wife was dying?
Yes.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he was a very, very good friend to Judy. He really was. And he was a great comfort to her. And, I have great respect and love for Brian. I mean, he's been a very, very good friend to the family always, and a good pal to me. And, I've great regard for him. Love to see him. It always cheers me up.
And likewise with me.
But how do you comfort, I suppose, somebody like Neil? We all face it, people who we love die. Like, I find that must be very difficult for you, because what can you say to Neil to make him feel better about losing the love of his life?
Well, the less the better.
Yeah.
What you say, the less the better. I mean, I think it's being present with people, listening to people, not expecting them to be in a particular way, to experience anger, to experience fear, to experience love, and just to be part of them. And all that is the sacrament. It's not, if you're not coming with something, putting on stoles and putting on a show for people, that's irrelevant, actually.
Did you find it lonely being a widower? Did you find it very hard when Judy did die?
For a while I did, yeah. It took quite a while to get used to it, But, I don't say I was glad when she died, but I was relieved because she was in dreadful agony and pain and so forth, and it was just a relief for her and for me and for everybody that she went. She went through a very bad time, and she was wonderful, very brave woman, and she was great fun, a great crack.
And she was.
She was a howl, an absolute howl.
And she loved Niall Toibin. She loved Niall Toibin. She loved the performance of Niall, not because it was a performance, but because she just loved fun. And she was just a bright, lovely, religious woman.
She was a howl.
And would you try and make her laugh, for instance?
No, yeah.
Up to the end, even like to try and...
No, yeah, when she was very ill, I'd be trying to make her laugh, And as... Actually... this is very sentimental now, but it's actually true that one time when she was very, very ill, and I said something and she laughed, and she said, "Oh God," she said, "I love you because you make me laugh." And it broke my heart, actually. It was...
And it was a lovely thing.
It was true, but it's just... It was almost like sort of saying, "I'm going to be gone soon," It was almost... But she was a great, great lady.
An absolutely wonderful person. And that is true, because even when you'd be talking to her, she'd be saying, next time you're talking to Neil, ask him about that. Or he's writing something great now. I can't tell it to you, but he did this for me yesterday. And she said, I was falling round the place at dinner time. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Especially when you were writing your book.
Yeah.
I presume you used to give her little performances.
No, I did, yeah. She loved to know what I was doing. You'd have to be let in on it, which she always was. And when I was writing the book, she'd read out bits for me, and she might suggest something improper. He should say about so-and-so, the old whore, The pity you didn't have a go at him, or something like that, And she was a great lady to laugh. She laughed.
And she loved the children, and she loved the grandchildren, and she was a real family woman. She had the house lovely, and there was always a roaring fire up in that lovely room on the right hand side, and in the door. It was lovely, just a very welcoming home.
Does your faith? Did it get strengthened, or did it test it if you see somebody you love suffering, Neil?
I think it strengthened it, yeah. It was a consolation. Judy was very, very... I'm not saying she was very religious, because she could F and blind like a trooper, but she was a really holy person,
yes.
And... she's also very frank, you were never left in any doubt as to, what the story was. So we were never kidding ourselves or each other, which was good, especially when she became ill. It became quite obvious to me that, this is the end, it might be protracted, but that's it,
You're lucky to have had that true love in your life.
Oh, was, yeah, very, yeah. undeserved, but there you are. That's the way it goes. She was an avid bridge player, that was her passion, was bridge. And when she was dying, she said to me one day, she said, God dealt me a lousy hand, that. It was the only time she ever complained, but that was she put it in terms of bridge, He dealt me a lousy hand.
I was privileged to know her, but I also know that Neil was privileged to have somebody like Judy. But she adored the ground.
Was she lucky to have Neil now? Is he as holy?
Yes. Well, when Mount Argus was reopening, and Cardinal O'Fee came down to say the mass, you see, and I got two people that I thought that had helped in the thing to do the readings in that day. The first was Mike Murphy from RT, who had been an altar boy in Mount Argus. Then the other one I got the second reading to do was Mr. Niall Toibin. He read the second reading from St. Paul's letter, and I always remember Cardinal O'Fee came up to preach afterwards, and he said, I had intended preaching on the second reading, but it has been so well read by Niall Toibin that there is nothing left to say. And for a cardinal to say that, whether he's holy or not, I can only quote the cardinal.
You could have been a very good cardinal, Neil. Actually, you played a lot of priests in your career.
Oh, I did.
You played a cardinal too, didn't you?
You were the priest in Brideshead. You were Father McNally in Ballycasangel.
That's right,
You've been a lot of priests, actually.
Oh, an awful lot of priests, yeah.
Would you think you might have made a good one, priest?
I don't think so.
He could act a good priest.
When you look at our array of politicians today, and obviously you did all that satire with Owen Harris, Wesley Burrows, Miriam O'Callaghan, do you ever look at them now and think, oh God, I'd love to be maybe slightly younger now and have a lash at all of these this shower?
I think it's gone beyond laughter. I think it's just so sad now, I think. I don't think anybody knows where we're going. I can't think of anybody that I would admire even,
Do you mimic them all privately when you're with your kids at home?
No, I don't. Not anymore. I've given up on our beloved country, I'm afraid. I mean, I don't know. I don't think we know where we're going. I don't know.
Have you really? Why?
There seems to be no radicalism left at all. Everybody is kind of... You need somebody to come out and roar, and condemn everything and liven people up and so forth.
I think it has a point. I think radicalism is the right word. Because Neil, being a Latin scholar, would know that radical comes from the word radix for roots, and it's from actually taking things by the roots. So, but I think the same is true for religion. There aren't any radicals left because they've been silenced, basically. And the whole of society has got sort of evened out at the present time. And who rules us anyway? Are we Europe, or is it Britain, or is it Jedward, or is it the X Factor? Where does it come from, and where's our culture anymore? What are we proud of? I mean, I've sat with Niall Toibin in the boxing stadium watching Bernard Dunn, and that was passion for him. And a young fella come up and could do it. Barry McGuigan was the same for me, right through it. Maybe the soccer team, maybe the Dubs, I think, did a bit for us by winning. So we have something that only comes to the top every now and again, but how do we let it out? Because people are so worried about their future they can't even laugh about the present. I think is a massive thing that we have got to look on to get our pride back in who we are and what we are. But how can you get your pride back if somebody else owns you? And in religion, it's Rome owns us, and in politics and in the banking world, it's Europe and a crowd of awful bankers. I mean, could you imagine yourself being in hock to anybody worse?
What would a Calvin man do? Sum it up for us as we end our show.
I don't know, I suppose he'd make sure to put his wallet in his back pocket and get out of the bloody place as quick as he could.
Never mind the dinner in the drawer.
Oh, well, I suppose hope will come back sometime, but even if it's only Bob Hope. But
there are little signs of it around the place, little signs of hope around the place, that there are a younger crowd of people who will not be, who will not be in hock to anybody. And I think I've never give up faith in people. I give up faith in institutions practically all the time. But eventually people will come through.
On that note, we're going to leave. It's been my pleasure. Brian, we're going to close in a piece of music, a song you love, a Mary Black song.
Mary was a neighbour of both of ours. She's a wonderful singer, a lovely person. And the O'Reillys are great. We're great too. Nobody sings so well as Mary. This lovely poem, really, by Steve Cooney, which says, "Bless the road." And Neil has blessed mine. I hope in some way I may be blessed his. And I hope we have a blessed road together.
Niall Toibin and Brian Darcy, thank you both very much. I hope you stay friends for the next 100 years. My thanks on sound today to Noel Roberts, to my producer Eileen Herron. We're here at the same time next Sunday. And of course, if you want to listen back to any of the RT programmes, including this, you can listen back on the RT radio player. For now, let's go out listening to Mary Black.
Miriam Meets on RTE Radio 1 with Miriam O'Callaghan.
Harris, didn't you? And Wesley Burrows and Graham McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Was that the show in a sense that maybe would have caused you a lot of criticism for being satirical?
I had a lot of personal discomfort over it, but I remember one time Jack Lynch, who was a neighbour of ours, he was Taoiseach at one time there, while I was sort of on the I was going to say on the game, but
another part of your career.
But yes, but he sort of said to me, "I see you're getting it tough." He says, "All the Holy Marys are at you."
Well, it was interesting. You grew up beside the Bishop's Palace in Cork, didn't you, Neil? Tell me about your own childhood, about where you grew up and what your parents were like.
Well, my father was a very peculiar and eccentric man. He was a very good man. He was very but fanatical. He never spoke English to anybody until it was absolutely necessary. He was very stern in many ways, but he was very humorous behind it all, which was his saving grace, actually.
What did your father do, Niall? What did your father do?
He was a teacher in the School of Commerce in Cork, and he taught, oddly enough, he taught English and Irish, and he was very eccentric in ways. He used to do breathing exercises, and this is true, and I'm not mocking my father, but he'd come on and go, "Oh," and all the crows would fly out of the garden. The neighbours did come to the conclusion that he was somewhere there. Well, I mean, it's one of the things that would come back to me anyway, because it used to corpse the place. I mean, I wouldn't be able to go on for another 3 minutes.
And it wasn't. I remember the first time he did that. It was in a show that you did in the Gaiety Theatre, probably the early days of your one-man show, coming direct in from RT and rep and all that. And you stood there with your Dickie Bowen black tie and all the rest of it. And this just came out. And I thought it was one of the funniest things I had ever seen in my life, because it's actually, the Old Testament is a bit like that, but it's just taken the Old Testament. And only Wesley
Burrows. Actually.
Wesley Burrows.
Brilliant writer.
Who wrote the Reardons, etc. And Glenn wrote too, I think.
Wesley wrote wonderful stuff.
Wonderful stuff. But it was just so good. Did you ever think of smiting them back? I just thought that was really nice. And you were saying to him that Niall used to tell stories that were maybe criticising priests. I don't think I ever heard him tell a story that actually criticised priests. He made fun of our foibles, which is a quite different thing altogether. And people can be very critical without being didactic in their criticism. But Neil was always, I mean, if you looked at him, you began to say, "I hate him because he's right."
But of course, you would have been doing this at a time When not everybody criticised the Catholic Church. I mean, to be honest, like, it was a very conservative, very deferential society when you were doing those kind of skits.
Oh my God, I went through a hell of a time, I can tell you. I mean, I was regarded as, the Antichrist, and I've had a collection of all the county councils that denounced me and so forth.
And would that mostly be, Neil, around like Time Now, Mr. T, the programme? You did that with Owen.
Miriam meets on RTE Radio 1 with Miriam O'Callaghan.
Hello there. My guests this morning have known each other for more than 40 years and are great friends. Just before Christmas, Cork-born actor and comedian Niall Toibin was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Irish Film and Television Academy. Father Brian Darcy was born in County Fermanagh. He entered religious life 50 years ago this year when he joined the Passionist Order at the Gran near Enniskillen. He's currently rector at the monastery there. Brian is known to a wider audience through his journalism and broadcasting. Some would describe him as an unofficial chaplain to the show business community. You've known each other for almost ever, have you, Neil?
Well, a very long time, yeah. He was a constant visitor, well, not a constant, but a frequent visitor to our house. And we fed him, because that's what you do when the priest arrives, you see. And as a matter of fact, one of the greatest stories we have was that when my grandson, Billy, was... one day I was on the phone and there was a knock came at the door and Billy was sort of prowling around under my feet, and I opened the door with one hand and continued talking on the phone with the other, and Brian came in, and just at that moment Billy found a sixpence under the table, looked at it, and without looking up just handed it over his shoulder to Father Darcy. And Brian said, "Oh my God, he has his cop done already. You find money, give it to the priest. That's what he's here for."
And that is a true story. I remember it was a Sunday afternoon. I dropped in, and I hadn't seen yourself or Julie for a while, and I just dropped in. I was visiting Dublin. I'd left Mount Argus at that stage, and had spent about 10 years trying to put a roof and the walls and everything else on Mount Argus, and everywhere everybody knew me as the beggar priest, And so he had his grandson brainwashed. When you see Darcy, give him money.
Can you remember the first time you met Neil?
My first time meeting Neil was from Neil was on stage and I was in the audience, and I've always been a huge fan of his. And then I used to meet him actually coming up to Mass. I don't think he'd like me saying this, but I was parish priest in Mount Argus for years, and Neil was our most distinguished parishioner in the whole place. And indeed, for many years, read the Irish lesson at Mass. And in the audience was people like Jack Lynch and Taoiseach Jack Lynch, who came to the same Irish Mass. And indeed...
and Jack Lynch made me come in. He said, "Just the one that they let you in here at all."
And he was a lovely man and a good friend of yours.
Well, he was a neighbour of ours. His aunt was our next door neighbour in Cork, when I was growing up. So
yeah,
I mean, he could take any liberties he liked with me. He knew too much about me anyway.
Because of course the interesting thing is, although as Brian says, you went to Mass a lot, at the same time you were probably doing your incredible satire about, criticising clerics in a way.
Yeah.
You did a famous Old Testament, didn't you?
It's one of the great things Neil ever did. Now, I don't think he's going to tell you, but I think the man he based it on used to say the Irish Mass in Mount Argus. He was one of those sort of tribal northerners who spoke Irish with a very northern accent like that. And Neil, I remember saying this to Neil in one of our first conversations. I know who you're imitating in that. And he didn't deny it then, and he's not likely to deny now. But Wesley Burroughs wrote a lovely thing for him about, do you know the battles that used to go on in the Old Testament?
Lo, it came to pass that the tribes of Gob rose up and fell upon the tribes of Gath and slew them, and brake their bodies and raped their women and ate their children and took their bodies and burnt them. And the tribes of Gath, being sore afraid, rose up and cried unto the Lord God, who is merciful, "Wherefore, O Lord, have we been smitten by these tribes of Gob?" And the Lord God who was merciful said unto them, ye have been by these stripes of Gob, because I forget what that is, but anyway, it goes on, and the tribes of Gob, and finally, no, Lord, they have smitten us again. And the Lord God who was merciful said unto them, for he was weary, have you not thought of smiting them back? And the tribes of Gath rose up and fell upon the tribes of Gob and smote them back and slew their camels and ripped their women and ate their children and brake their bodies. And the Lord God, who was merciful, saw it and was pleased.
No, you see, that was wonderful. And that's the way I think the man's an absolute genius.
That for 30 years.
I know, thanks a million, because that wasn't planned. So is it just somewhere in the back?